Are you back, baby girl?
If you've been hoping for another chapter in Laura and Massimo's messy but addictive love story, the outlook may seem a little uncertain right now. But let's be real. When has uncertain ever stopped Netflix from revisiting a franchise that's popular with fans? The 365 Days trilogy may not have been adored by critics, but it exploded with viewers, becoming one of Netflix's most watched guilty pleasures. Because of that, it feels a little hard to believe that Netflix would just stop here, especially when there's still so much left hanging after the third movie. So even though nothing's been officially confirmed yet, there's still a good chance that 365 Days 4 could eventually find its way onto our screens. The franchise has always had an interesting relationship with its source material. The films are based on Blanka Lipińska's best-selling novels, but they don't always follow the books exactly. In fact, the next 365 Days, the third movie, veered pretty far from the plot of the final book, and because of that, it actually left the door wide open for Netflix to keep the story going, even without another novel to adapt. That's pretty important, because Lipińska hasn't written a fourth book. But just because she hasn't doesn't mean Netflix can't. They've already shown they're willing to take creative liberties, so there's nothing stopping them from continuing Laura and Massimo's story in an original way. The third movie left things in a very ambiguous place. We saw Laura drifting further away from Massimo after all the trauma she went through, especially the heartbreaking loss of her pregnancy, which she finally confessed to him. That revelation created a wedge between them, and during that emotional gap, Laura found herself pulled toward Nacho, the charming outsider who brought a completely different energy into her life. She even ended up sleeping with him while on a trip to Portugal. It wasn't exactly shocking, since the tension between them had been building, but it definitely complicated things. Massimo, instead of exploding with jealousy like we might have expected, actually gave Laura space. He told her to take the time to figure out what she really wanted, which was a huge shift in how he approached their relationship. And during this time, Laura struggled with her own desires and fantasies, at one point even imagining a threesome involving both Nacho and Massimo. But eventually she did come back to her husband, and that's where things got even more complicated. The ending of The Next 365 Days was quieter than fans predicted. Instead of a massive dramatic twist like the previous movies, we saw Laura and Massimo on the beach, having a heartfelt conversation. Massimo revealed that he only wanted to be with her if that was truly what she wanted. He even brought up a lesson from his late father about love, that if you really care about something, you let it go, and if it comes back, it was always meant to be. It was surprisingly mature, especially coming from a man who literally kidnapped Laura in the first film to make her fall in love with him. The moment ended with him asking Laura, "Are you back, baby girl?" But the movie cut to credits before we got an answer. That cliffhanger is exactly why a fourth film feels so possible. Because honestly, who ends a trilogy on such an ambiguous note unless they're leaving room for more? While the books ended in a much darker, more twisted way, with Massimo imprisoning Laura again and the death of her dog, a change most fans were relieved the movie skipped, the Netflix adaptations chose a different tone. Instead of leaning into chaos, they decided to give Laura more agency and Massimo a softer side. That kind of ending feels less like a conclusion and more like a setup for what comes next. If 365 Days 4 does happen, the most obvious storyline to pick up would be Laura finally making her choice between Massimo and Nacho. She's been caught between them for so long, and the third film left the decision unresolved. A sequel could open with her choosing one of them and exploring the fallout of that decision. Maybe she commits to Massimo and we see how they rebuild trust after so much heartbreak. Or maybe she chooses Nacho, which could set off an even bigger rivalry between the two men. Either way, there's a bunch of drama still left to unfold. And let's not forget Olga and Domenico. Their wedding is a loose thread from the third film that never really got much focus, but it could make a perfect backdrop for a fourth movie. Weddings always bring emotions to the surface, so placing Laura, Massimo, and Nacho in the same room during a big celebration would be the perfect recipe for tension, revelations, and maybe even another life or death twist. Because if there's one thing this franchise is known for, it's taking everyday events and turning them into over-the-top melodrama. When you think about it, 365 Days 4 almost feels inevitable. Netflix thrives on franchises that get people talking, and whether you love or hate the movies, people definitely talk about them. The trilogy has been endlessly dissected by critics, YouTubers, and fans, and even though most of the reviews have been negative, the film's popularity hasn't dipped. In fact, the controversy only seems to make more people curious about them, and that kind of attention is hard for Netflix to resist. Casting would also be a no-brainer. Anna Maria Sieklucka and Michele Morrone are essential as Laura and Massimo. Simone Susinna's Nacho has basically become the third lead, so he'd definitely return as well. Fans have also grown attached to supporting characters like Olga, Domenico, and Laura's parents, who could easily be brought back for more subplots. With all these actors willing and available, the logistics of another film don't seem all that complicated. The real question is timing. The first two sequels were filmed back-to-back and released only a few months apart in 2022, which gave fans hope that the momentum would continue. But since it's been 3 years without news of a fourth film, some have started to lose hope. Still, the gap doesn't mean the end. If anything, it might suggest that Netflix is waiting for the right moment, maybe to test how strong the fan demand still is. And given how often fans debate the ambiguous ending of the next 365 days, it's clear that interest hasn't disappeared. Even though critics were quick to call the trilogy bone-tired or even the worst trilogy of all time, fans keep showing up for it. That loyalty matters because it proves there's still an audience who wants to see what happens next. And honestly, there's also a chance that a fourth movie could address some of the criticisms more directly. If the third film already took a step toward portraying Laura with more agency and focusing on consent, maybe the fourth could continue in that direction while still delivering the steamy drama people expect. Another thing worth considering is how Netflix has been expanding its international productions. The 365 Days trilogy is one of their biggest Polish exports, and its success has put even more attention on that market. So producing a fourth installment wouldn't just be about giving fans closure, it would also be about continuing to invest in a proven global hit. And because the movies are relatively inexpensive to make compared to big Hollywood blockbusters, the risk for Netflix is pretty low. It might take a little longer than fans expected, but don't be surprised if the next 365 days brings news of 365 Days Part 4. And that's that for today's video, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video.